Lindsay Rhodes and Michael Fabiano back with you with a great show today. Very much looking forward to all that we are going to tackle. I'm excited to talk to Mike Renner in just a bit, draft analyst, formerly of PFF and The Messenger before that platform went under. He's one of the many people that are wonderfully talented that have been affected by the recent changes in the digital media landscape, which I could do an entire podcast episode about in itself. But I feel strongly that his is a voice that should have a bigger platform at the moment. And I'm thrilled that he's agreed to come share his expertise with us. He's going to be helping us isolate differences in the draft prospect skill sets so that we can more accurately picture what they might look like on and how they might contribute differently to the different teams around the league that could draft them. We're trying, as always, to figure out what their fantasy value might be for us. And we have another guest today who should be paying particularly close attention because he needs to very much so up his game in fantasy next year. Fabs, tell us about our first guest as we welcome him in.
Well, you know, the kids post these videos on TikTok and they go viral. Okay. Mm-hmm. And our guest has one of those videos that have gone viral, and it surrounds the fact that he absolutely positively sucks at fantasy football. And
yeah, he's like, I'm gonna have computer difficulties. Can't hear you anymore.
So let's bring in Tyler Harding. I assume no relation to Tanya. I don't want to get hit in the knees with a pipe. Tyler posted a video on TikTok about his fantasy football punishment for finishing in last place in his league. Tyler, I don't think you'll ever get a better introduction. Maybe you will.
Probably not.
Welcome to the program. So talk about your fantasy league punishment, what you've got to do, and whether or not maybe you had a bit of an issue with your roster, who was on your team.
Start with the punishment.
Failed you.
Good God, just spit out a question, my guy.
So let's start off with the punishment. What is the punishment for finishing last in your league?
Okay, so in this league, we've got a 12-man league, and every year right before the draft, we'll all throw in ideas of what we can do for a punishment. And then we kind of narrow it down to 3 or 4, and then everyone votes on one. So this year, it was that whoever lost had to take the ACT again. And which, you know, when there's 12 people, it's like, oh, that's a good one because all I have to do is be better than just one of the 12 people. Seems easy. Whoops. But anyways, so, and I'm actually the oldest person in this league as well. So
what are you like 35? I mean, you look like a young man.
I'm 32.
Yeah, see? So you're right there. You're a young man.
Yeah, I'm still young.
So you got beat by a bunch of kids is what you're telling us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I lost, but then also we didn't want it to be like, you just go in and mark whatever answers. And so we had looked up what the national average was, and the number that we found was 19. And so the idea was you have to get at least a 19. And if I don't get a 19, then we lower it 2 points and you have to take it again. So I got to get a 17. So, and I haven't gotten my score back yet, so I don't know. And it's been 14 years since I graduated high school. So
okay, so so you walk into this ACT room. I have vague recollections of what this is like, right? Because it's been more than 14 years for me. So you walk into this room, and what's that experience like? Like, what are people? Are you by far the oldest person in the room? Is everyone else there 18?
Oh yeah, 100%. Everyone else there looks like they're like 15 or 16. They're all juniors. So I walk in. And I got there like 10 minutes early because I wasn't sure how like strict it was because I didn't really remember, right? And I was like, there was like 3 or 4 other people there. I ended up being in a room of about 20 people. And I'm just like, I mean, I've got my beard. I'm like so obviously older than everyone else. And I just felt like the big kid like huddled in the back corner at his desk. And we're sitting like in high school desk, you know, where the desk is connected to the chair. And it was just, I don't know, everyone was looking at me. And then I actually told the proctor as I walked out, because they kind of gave me a funny look. I was like, yeah, I lost my fantasy football league, so this was our punishment. And they were just like dying laughing. They thought it was so funny. I didn't end up telling any of like the kids because I didn't want to like be creepy and
they
talk to these kids.
They probably were so scared of you. They're like, to be that old taking the ACT, like, did he like murder somebody and get held back? Like, like
right?
what kind
He
of
just got
person
out of
is that
prison.
age? Oh, it's still in high school. Woo.
Yeah.
So there were what, 75 questions total? Is that how many you had to answer?
There was like 5 sections, and this was the other part that was the worst, is like they give you like an hour on the first part and it's like 75 questions, and then you get an hour, and that was math, I think. Oh no, that was, I don't remember what order, but there was a math section, a reading section, an English section, and a science section, and then a 5th section that I guess was randomized for everyone, and it was like another of one of those 4 sections to, I don't know why. But all of it's time, so you can't go ahead. So I had to sit there for like 5 hours in this room with all these high schoolers, just feeling so awkward the whole time.
For the math, you can't use a calculator or anything like that. So it's all on pen and paper, right?
So you can bring a calculator. I didn't bring one though, because
you got it on your phone though.
Can't have your phone.
But they don't. I couldn't bring my phone in. You have to like leave.
So wait, so outside. You can use a calculator for the math, and people should nail all the questions.
What are you talking about? Like you clearly haven't been near a school for a million years.
Wait a minute.
He could Google every answer.
I've got an ACT question right here. A car averages 27 miles per gallon. And gas costs $4.04 per gallon. Which of the following is closest to how much the gas would cost for this car to travel 2,727 miles? That's easy if you have a calculator.
Right. Yeah. So the ones like that, and I didn't bring a calculator because I figured, like, we'll just see how it goes. But those ones you can just figure out on pen and paper, or with a calculator, it wouldn't be too hard. But there were some that were more like the concept of like, they got all the letters and to the whatever power divided by XY to the 5th power times Y to the 5th power. And those ones, and you're supposed to like simplify it and figure out what's like those ones. Those are the ones I was nope.
Did you study for this?
Don't remember that.
Before you went back?
Nope,
were you
not for 1 second.
Okay. How hard was it?
I kind of wanted to go. It was, I felt really confident up until like 2 days before. And then I was like, I haven't done any of this in a long time. Like, I'm toast. And then I went in, I was kind of nervous. Like, obviously I don't really care what my score is because of, I've gone to college, I'm done with all that, but I didn't want to have to take it again. But then as I took it, I was like, okay, I feel like everything was more like, rather than like remembering really specific facts, it was more like conceptual and like understanding stuff. And so for the most part, I feel pretty good. The math was definitely the one where there's a few questions where I was like, oh boy, no idea.
All right, so
and move on.
Let's talk about how you got to this place. What happened with your fantasy football team? Who was on the team? Who sucked? Who broke your heart? What bad decisions did you make?
Before he answers that, this is a salary cap draft. So that's the league we're talking about. It's a redraft team. It's a traditional roster, except for the fact that there were 3 flex spots. I ran out of air there. What the heck? So that's what we're looking at here. And now, what went wrong?
Okay, so like she said, it's a salary cap. So my kind of idea going in was I was going to spend big. Everyone has 200 fantasy dollars, right? So I was going to spend big on 2 guys at the beginning, try to get 2 guys that I felt like were going to be powerhouses for my team, and then wait until the end of the draft and get some sleepers, hopefully. But so I ended up, my first 2 picks were Justin Jefferson, who got hurt, obviously, and Devontae Adams, who had a real bummer of a year. So I spent, I think, about 130 of my $200 just on those 2 guys. Yeah. So in the league, like the high guys typically go around $70. And so I got Justin Jefferson, and then Devontae Adams I got for like 53 or 54. So it was a good deal at the time, but then obviously didn't end up being one. But I'll read you guys my roster, who I had. I ended up getting a good deal on Lamar Jackson. So I had Lamar Jackson as my quarterback. My 2 running backs were Kenneth Walker III and David Montgomery, who at the first half of the season was way better than people expected. Then Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams. Then I had David Njoku for my tight end. And then my 3 flex guys were Hollywood Brown, Jamal Williams, who I thought was going to be good because Alvin Kamara.
That was nothing burger.
He did nothing. And then after what's his name? After Nick Chubb went down, I got Jerome Ford off waivers. So that was kind of my lineup going after week 1. And so, like, on paper, looking at my roster versus the rest of my league, I felt super solid.
Yeah.
And then obviously Justin Jefferson got hurt. Kenneth Walker and David Montgomery got hurt at different times. Devontae Adams didn't do well. Hollywood Brown fell off a cliff after a few weeks. Jamal Williams. Anyways, and in the past, my other problem is in the past, and I told you guys before the show, but I actually lost my league 2 years ago as well. But in the past, my problem was panicking and like, okay, these guys are getting hurt. I've got to have good players right now. So I trade away my Justin Jefferson to try to get a few guys. But then by the end of the season, I've got a bunch of lower level guys. And, you know, then you're just guessing which flex guy you should be starting as a starter. And then, so this year I was like, no, I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to panic. I'm going to hold on. And then every week their value just went down and down and down. And then I lost.
What do you think, Fabs? What would your advice be in this set of circumstances?
I will say this. I mean, luck is a big part of fantasy football, winning and losing. And unfortunately, you had some bad luck when you lose Jefferson, especially. I don't know that many people who did very well who had Justin Jefferson, because when you sink your first pick into a player that misses most of the season and he is an elite player, that's rough. My advice would be that you should maybe reach out to Lindsey Rhodes and myself next season, and maybe we can help you and not finish last, and you could actually go. Now, I don't know if it's the same.
You're going to go worst to first?
Year, but you could go worst to first.
Yeah.
Okay. And then instead of posting a TikTok video about how you suck, we'll get you like a trophy smack belt, and you can walk around with the belt around your shoulder or around your waist. And then you can make fun of the dude who finished in last, who maybe has to take the ACT test or whatever.
My rags to riches story.
There you go.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
We will sponsor you, but not financially.
Absolutely. Perfect.
So actually,
because not for nothing, Tyler, you wouldn't be a good financial investment coming off of what you just did last year, but we're here to help you.
Perfect.
So we could have you back or come draft season. We could like formulate a plan with you to go into this draft. Let's rig this thing. Let's tilt this in your favor. Whatever it takes.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
I'd love that.
We're fine with cheating, right, Fabs? Like, I don't know if this is counts as that, but like we are good with that.
I'm not going to say I'm good with cheating, but I'll help Tyler.
Okay, bud. Okay. Yeah.
Tyler, you have to understand, all is fair in love and fantasy football when it comes to Lindsey Rhodes. Like she will literally do whatever she has to do to win. Yeah. Whatever she has to do.
Yeah. And I think it sounds like, especially in this type of a league, because I think you didn't do anything wrong with your draft. Like your draft is fine, right? Like you knew what you were doing here.
Right.
Maybe there's a little bit more spread out the depth so that if a guy goes down, your whole team doesn't fall apart, right? Yeah. Like that might be the lesson learned, but you don't want to overcorrect, because how frequently is it that, a Justin Jefferson that you're going all in on, like, gets hurt and you have to deal with what we dealt with last year with his quarterback also getting hurt, right? Like that was just a perfect storm of awfulness from a fantasy standpoint in ways that you can't necessarily predict. But it's the navigating of the waiver wire and trying to like zig when those zags come your way. And so maybe we can help you next year in that department.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right. So
obviously use all the help I could get.
So first assignment is you have to let us know when your ACT score comes in.
Okay. Definitely.
And then we'll revisit before the draft. We'll figure this out. We'll get you on top. Because no more Fabs, you didn't hear it. Like when he lost 2 years ago, he had to do the Waffle House challenge, which other people, of course, are familiar with.
I did hear you guys. I had some technical difficulties, but you guys couldn't see me. How many waffles? How many did you eat?
So I had to be there for 24 hours, and each waffle took off an hour of my time. I was there for 12 hours and ate 12 waffles. So I went in at about 7 in the morning and I just kind of set up shop in the corner. I took my laptop so I could just work there. And I just told them, just keep the waffles coming.
Will you ever eat a waffle in your life again, or have you?
I don't know if I have. I definitely have not paid for a waffle since then.
You haven't paid for what does that mean?
I haven't like gone out to eat intentionally. Okay. Like, I'm going to go to IHOP and get waffles or whatever. But like, maybe at home or something in those last.
Did you get sick? Like when you went home, were you like popping Imodiums, or like what were you doing?
I was.
Leave it to Fabs to paint.
I think I was a little backed up for a few days.
The grossest picture possible.
Whoa! Right. Well, I mean, you eat all that gluten and yuck and stuff like that. I mean, you might have a little gastric upset going on. You never know.
Tyler Harding.
It's part of the punishment.
Did you even say his name at the top of the show, Fabs? I think you were like, our guest took the ACT and he sucked
I asked him. I said he's not related to Tanya Harding.
Okay. Sorry.
That's right. No relation, by the way.
I apologize.
That would be kind of funny if it were, but that's okay.
Yeah. When I was growing up, we would get phone calls.
No one would want you to finish last because they'd be afraid you'd come after him with a lead pipe. You think you're going to put me in a Waffle House or make me take the essay?
I'm going to call Aunt Tanya and have her take care of you.
You guys.
I love it.
All right, Tyler. Thank you so much for coming on to tell us about your weekend with the high schoolers. I hope that you pass. Yes. Part of me kind of hopes that you don't, though. Like, no, because it's better content for you.
So rotten,
it's better. Like, how many views has that TikTok had? How many views?
It's just about. I looked this morning. It was at just under 6 million views on that one.
Is part of you hoping that you don't pass so that you can go back again and like you're an influencer? Like you get enough of these videos and like you have influencer status.
No, I think I told someone I was going to come talk to you guys, and they said, "Well, it's better if you lose next year because then you'll have another video that you can post about your punishment."
Totally.
So
you can lean into this. You are the face of shitty fantasy football managers, and like it's.
I know it's what a world we live in. If you had posted, like, say that you go worst to first, and you post a video next season about how you won a championship, no one's going to give a rat's ass.
Right. No one cares.
Okay, we don't care. 500 views. But boy, I suck and I got to go do this. Almost 6 million. That's what it is.
Yep.
Yes, it's been pretty funny, and I mean it's a cool experience for sure, and it's been fun. But it's funny like what led to it,
I love it. Well, I'm invested now. We're gonna make sure you win next year. Sorry to the rest of your league that you've been a part of for 5 years, but we're gonna get Tyler to the top. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Okay, we'll see ya.
All right. Excited to talk to Mike Renner in just a second about the draft. First, though, a reminder that BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, NHL playoffs, all of the latest stats, news, scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. And now we welcome in Mike Renner, draft analyst extraordinaire. Excited to get your take on all of these different guys and specifically the ways in which you see the draft maybe differently than consensus. At this point, anybody who's listening to our podcast is probably vaguely familiar with the guys that, are going to go early on, or the fact that like it's a quarterback and wide receiver heavy draft, offensive tackles, stuff like that. But for fantasy purposes, it strikes me that, particularly with wide receiver in the last few years, things have changed, and that wide receivers are have different skill sets. Like not all wide receivers are created the same. So they might look different in different offenses. And so I'm looking for you to help kind of figure out what those differences are. And so we can maximize our landing spots. And I know when to get excited and when to be sad because the guy went to the wrong place in the draft or went to the right place in the draft. So thank you so much for making time to come talk to us.
For sure. Thanks for having me on.
By the way, I do have to mention, you didn't tell me this guy is this handsome. He reminds me a little bit of your husband.
This got weird all of a sudden.
There are some features that are very similar to Matt Rhodes, who is also a handsome devil. So Mike. She just.
I didn't know we were doing player comp.
We're face grading.
we are.
Just I'm
going to do a comp to you. Your comp for me is Elliot Harrison, who we used to work with at NFL Network. Also, a handsome son of a bitch who knows his football stuff. So I'm going to get that out of the way. We're going to get right to football. The top of the draft, the 3 wide receivers who are going to go in some order: Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze. Of the teams in the top 10 who potentially could be going after some of these wide receivers, like which receivers are the best fits for the specific offenses? Like, the Giants are going to look for a wide receiver. The Chargers, the Cardinals are going to look for a wide receiver. The Bears could look for a wide receiver. Which of these players best fits which team based on their skill set and the offense they'd be going to?
So I think Marvin Harrison Jr. to Arizona is that's the perfect fit. That's why I've never even thought about mocking him anywhere else, because just when Kyler Murray was at his best, he had that X receiver on the outside. And that's Marvin Harrison is just that. He is the vertical downfield. You almost don't want him running a route that's not more than 10 yards down the football field, because he's so good. He's at that level of the football field. His usage is going to look like a Julio Jones, AJ Green. So that's what they're missing. They have some slot guys there in Arizona. They don't have that vertical threat. To me, the New York Giants, I would love Rome Odunze there. I think that, to me, is the fit I love for him, because they need a number one go-to guy. Third down, 3rd and 6, need a guy to get open, move the chains. That's him. To me, I think Malik Neighbors to Chicago is where I hope he falls. Don't think it's going to happen. But with Caleb Williams in the second reaction plays and how much he can extend, if Malik Neighbors goes to Chicago, you can't stick with Malik Neighbors for more than 3 seconds. It's just no one does. No one did in college football. I don't think anyone's going to be able to in the NFL. So him going to a guy who can create those sort of plays is something I would love, not only for him, but obviously for Caleb Williams and his development. So those the 3 fits, the ideal for each in terms of just team and need. But they're all so good that it really doesn't matter where they go. I think they're all going to.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if you'd said something about the Chargers, because the Chargers offense, based on what we've seen from Greg Roman before, is not really fantasy friendly from a wide receiver perspective. But what kind of wide receiver could thrive there? I mean, remember they had Anquan Bolden, who was more of the physical type of guy. They had a Michael Crabtree as well, but neither one of them was more than a wide receiver 2 in fantasy. So what wide receiver would fit there? Even if it's not one of the 3 guys we just mentioned, is there somebody else that would be a good fit for Los Angeles?
Yeah, I do still think they go O-line or trade down. I just think that's how Jim Harbaugh wants to build his team. And there's some darn good O-line prospects as well. But of those 3, I would probably lean Rome Odunze of those 3 to the Chargers, just because they need reliability. They have, even just for Justin Herbert's sake, they need a guy who's reliable, kind of a go-to guy who has good hands that can run a full route tree, because that's still something they're missing in the offense. So I think that's where I'd go for them. But again, I don't think they go wide receiver, but if they do, there's really no wrong answer.
I want to ask you a follow-up question about Chicago, because Chicago is an interesting one where I see a lot of mocks putting them with one of these top 3 wide receivers for obvious reasons. I think it makes sense to pair Caleb Williams with a wide receiver that he's going to come up with. And so he always has that kind of battery partner throughout his career. They also, though, have made some moves this offseason. So the wide receiver room is not a disaster as it stands right now. It's not an obvious glaring need. I mean, if they did go grab a Neighbors or Rome Odunze at 9, then they have arguably the best wide receiver room in the NFL. We're in that conversation now, but they don't have to do that. How do you see that situation in terms of them maybe going O-line instead and trading down and getting a wide receiver, or whether or not you think that high-end wide receiver at 9 should be a priority for them?
If one falls to me at 9, I'm drafting them. I'm not desperate to move up. I think if I'm the Jets at 10, I'm a little more desperate to move up and get one of those guys with their timeline. But I'm not desperate to go get one, because they've come around back in the 3rd round. There could still be a guy who could fill that role. But Keenan Allen's a 1-year deal, right? He's not going to be there long term. That's not, so it could still make a ton of sense. But I think they're going defensive side of the ball at that point, realistically, because their defensive line's still bad. Even with Montez Sweat, they still have holes. It's still thin. So I think that's probably where they're looking, but I don't anticipate one falling to them, truthfully. These guys are too good. Even in a deep wide receiver class, it's like 3 like true number 1 wide receivers that
You
can
don't
really get
think
top
that the
draft.
third wide receiver gets to 9?
I don't think it has.
Wow.
I don't think it does on draft day. And the only way is if we see like really a ton of QBs go, but I even think, 8 could be a trade spot where someone wants to go get one jump to Chicago. I think Tennessee even could because of Callahan, what he had with 3
Yes.
wide receivers and how well he could mitigate offensive line play in Tennessee. I don't think they're locked into one. And pretty much everyone, Arizona, the Giants, I think they're going to be taking one as well. So I don't know if we'll see a wide receiver drop, one of those 3 drop to 9.
You mentioned quarterbacks. I've done some research. You may or may not know I love trends. I love the history of the NFL and what it can teach us as Lindsay shakes her head.
Well, it's just what you think is a trend and what might actually be a trend. It's like a pattern versus whatever. Go ahead.
Okay. Same thing. Since 2000, about 57% of the quarterbacks drafted in the top 10 have either really failed to meet expectations or have been mediocre. And we saw that just a few years ago. I mean, Trevor Lawrence has not been great. Zach Wilson was a massive dud. Trey Lance, I mean, the guy hadn't even started double-digit games in the league, and he got traded for a 4th-round pick. I can't for the life of me understand why everyone is up J.J. McCarthy's keister. And all of a sudden, this guy goes from being maybe a late 1st-round pick to being a top 3 to 5 to 6 picks. What am I missing on this kid?
You're missing being able to talk to him, right? I think that's how he gets to this point, is being able to see what kind of kid he is, his knowledge of X's and O's, the determination he has. That's what's easy about it. So, like, we talk about Zach Wilson and why he fails. And it wasn't talent-based, right? It wasn't the arm talent. It was the work he was willing to put in, the effort he was willing to put in, the leadership he brought to the table. None of those are really concerns with J.J. McCarthy. So I think that's why you're seeing teams where a guy who objectively, in my opinion, his tape is borderline 1st round. I'm not going to sell you on his tape any more than anyone else. His own coach wouldn't let him throw in some games, right? So it's a rarity in today's day and age, his prospect profile going in the top 10. But he has a lot of the off field. There's no red flags in that regard and what it takes. And so I think a lot of people are seeing people like maybe Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts, the guys who are ticking those boxes, who maybe had, who had themselves big holes in their prospect profiles coming out in terms of performance, getting better. And I think that's what you have to do no matter who you are. Unless you're CJ Stroud in the NFL, you have to get better. And so when adversity hits, JJ is going to do whatever it takes to try to overcome it. Some guys won't. And so I think that's what you're seeing is someone's going to buy into that aspect of his game. But I'm with you. You watch the tape, and everyone in the NFL, scouts and whatnot, they love saying, go back to the tape. The tape does not say top 10.
2 things just to follow up really quickly on that. One, this is the offense and the coach that we're discussing now in terms of building the Chargers roster. And we're like, oh, they don't need a wide receiver. I mean, we're not saying this, but people are, because that's not Jim Harbaugh's offense. He doesn't want to be that. It's not a priority. Okay, well, they have Justin Herbert. So if they run what they did in Michigan, what they've done in San Francisco in the Chargers offense, that doesn't mean that Justin Herbert's a shitty quarterback, right? Like, so in terms of evaluating JJ McCarthy, like, we have to kind of understand the environment, and we're putting that environment on the Chargers and acting like that's okay. So I don't know that it's necessarily an example of the things that JJ can't do because we didn't see him do it. And I think that that's part of the evaluation, is that people understand that. Like, this is just the offense, and what he was asked to do, he did well. I think the Purdy comp there, not in terms of what they do well or whatever, but just stylistically, narratively, right? Like that type of quarterback that if you plop him into the right offense that asks him to do very specific things that he can do well, and they're like, oh, we can't do that. Well, we just won't ask him to do that. I think that's a really good kind of comp in that sense. I feel strongly that quarterback success in the NFL for most quarterbacks is linked to environment. Sam Darnold is the example I bring up all the time. Fabs rolls his eyes. If he had gone to a different team out of the gate, I think we might be talking about him very differently today. So of the quarterbacks that are expected to go early in the draft, and maybe the answer is the one we've already talked about in JJ McCarthy, which one is the most landing spot specific in your opinion?
I think he's landing spot specific for sure, but I also think like Jaden Daniels is offense specific. You better be running a certain type of offense in a manner in which, like, I would say the same about like Russell Wilson and how he had to be running when he was at his peak a certain type of offense, and it's a similar type of offense in terms of it better be play action heavy, it better be deep ball heavy, and it better utilize his rushing threat. It better utilize his legs. If you're really not tapping into those things with Jaden Daniels and asking him to be, so I worry about him going to Cliff Kingsbury's offense number 2. If you're asking him to be just like that guy from the pocket, there's too many worries about how he handles pressure. And his first reaction to pressure is he bolts. He is a guy who is bolting for pockets, and he doesn't scramble to throw like the guys we're seeing, like the Bryce Youngs of the world, like even CJ Stroud was last year. He scrambles to run. And that's something that I do worry that if you're not, he goes to the wrong situation with a bad offensive line that's not going to really tap into those things. I got to keep going back to Washington with that because those all apply to them. I do worry about what it'll look like. But if he goes elsewhere and they're willing to, Greg Roman's offense would be a great offense for him. But like something stylistically like that and willing to buy into that, it could be a nightmare to try to defend.
Okay, so I will play a little game here quickly. Among the teams near the top of the draft, including those that might move up, I'm going to give you the team. You're going to tell me which quarterback offensively, stylistically is the best fit. Now, Caleb Williams is going to the Bears. So, I mean, like, I'm not even going to mention him because he's going to Chicago. So, Washington, Cliff Kingsbury, which quarterback best fits that offense?
I'm not sure there's a ton of quarterbacks that fit Cliff Kingsbury's offense. He hasn't had a ton of success. Even Pat Mahomes didn't really fit his offense way back in Texas Tech, unfortunately. But so I don't really wish that on anyone.
You're a big fan, I can tell.
Yeah. Of these guys, I think I would go J.J. McCarthy.
Really?
Honestly, I think more like Bo Nix could run that offense well because it's a lot of like underneath and then vertical on the outside. I think he could do that offense well. But JJ or Bo Nix are probably like the two guys that I think fit that.
Okay, New England Patriots, you've got Alex Van Pelt as the new OC. Obviously, the entire coaching staff is brand new. Jared Mayo come in to be the head coach. What quarterback would be the best fit for that offense?
I think that one's Drake May. I think he would be great in that. Obviously, not right away because they don't have the talent to be great in that, but I do think he has the skill set to operate that sort of offense.
All right, I'm going to give you 2 more. Giants with Dayball and Minnesota, who very, very well might move up, and Kevin O'Connell. Give me the best fits for those 2 teams.
So Dayball's where I would love Jaden Daniels to go. I think that is the fit for him. He's done it before. He knows how to scheme around that rushing threat from the quarterback position.
He would be perfect.
And obviously perfect for that. Yeah. So that's Jaden Daniels' ideal fit for me. Everyone wants, like, as a player, you probably want to go number 2 overall, but I think if ideally hoping he falls to number 6 overall, he would flourish there. And then for the Vikings, I'm going back to Drake May again, but I also think McCarthy, that's a situation where he could thrive too. He's a guy who's a quick decision maker and throws so well outside the numbers, corner routes, those sort of things. That's an offense that takes advantage of those throws a lot.
Yeah, Linz, remember that was on my wish list. Minnesota moving up and getting Drake May. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I feel like JJ is where I've like penciled him in there in Minnesota, but I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. What about these 2 teams that need quarterbacks that could move around to get the guys later in the draft? Who best fits, like, if the Raiders make a move at quarterback, who do you think that makes the most sense there?
I would love for them to just like sit and wait on this quarterback class. There's 2 guys who I think will be there on day 2 that you could just take a chance on again in that room, because I don't think it's a great team overall. No guys taking the promised land right away, but Michael Penix Jr. to that offense, I would take that chance.
Second
round for that.
Not a 13.
Yeah. So Michael Penix Jr. Not in the first round. So I think Michael Penix Jr. the Raiders is like, because they're too far behind. And so when you're behind Minnesota, behind Denver, the price you're going to have to pay to compete with those 2, you're just going to leave yourself so hampered from a team building perspective that to compete for like QB4, right? Because to a guy who may not even be, with like some serious flaws as a prospect, not something.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that they telegraphed that they're not moving up. when they went out and signed Gardner Minshew, who I would say is probably the highest end of the bridge quarterbacks. Like you're bringing him in over AOC if you plan on playing him, right? Like, so if you draft somebody, I think you're positioning yourself to sit him for a year. So I think that makes sense. What about the Broncos? Where did they get a quarterback here? And who is it?
I think Bo Nix is the one that I keep going back to for the Broncos, and that they don't have the firepower from Minnesota does to move up in this quarterback class and go get a guy. And so they may have to sit on it. They obviously don't have a second-round pick this year's draft. So 12's rich, maybe, but I think he's such a good fit for Sean Payton's offense. Everyone talks about, he only throws underneath. He's a check-down artist. What did Drew Brees do the last 5 years in New Orleans, right? I mean, he did not throw more than 15 yards downfield in some games and led a high-end offense. And that's what he does. And while that may have a limited ceiling, I think Sean Payton's good enough at scheming those up, and he's quick enough, Bo Nix was, and experienced enough that, he could step in and start right away for the Broncos.
All right, Mike, I don't know if you know, but I'm a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan. Typically, I die hard with them because they haven't done jack in 30 years. But I am very excited about the potential for the Cowboys to draft a running back potentially in round 2. I love what I've seen from Jonathan Brooks. I know he's coming off the ACL. Trey Benson's going to be in the mix there as well. Cowboys running backs historically have had a lot of success statistically. Even dating back to Darren McFadden. You remember Joe Randall that year? I mean, they would have combined to be the RB2 that season when Randall got kicked off the team after 6 games. Which of the top running backs fits best in Dallas's scheme?
I would love Jonathan Brooks to go there, and I think it's very
Mike.
realistic.
Let's get it done, man.
That one, it just makes too much sense. I think he's the most NFL-ready runner in the mix. Like Blake Corum is too. He's very ready to run the NFL, but he is a great zone scheme runner, super versatile in terms of he has pass catching ability as well. Just so smooth. I think he fits exactly what they need. And if I'm Dallas, they got pick 24. Their needs are interior O-line running back. I'm looking to trade back because it's such a strong interior offensive line class on day 2. And you need that running back on day 2. Where they're drafting on day 2 could be that's right the range where I'd expect the first running back to come off the board. So that's the one I keep going back to for them.
Come on, baby. That gets me fired up. Sorry, Linz. Go ahead.
The running backs, we talked about this earlier in the week. The running backs specifically in this class, because there isn't a Bijan Robinson or somebody that's by far and away that guy who could be your workhorse back, and everyone agrees that the skill set's the best that's there. So this feels like it's going to be an eye of the beholder type of draft at running back, and maybe specifically the ways in which a running back skill set matches what a specific offense or the drafting team might be looking for. Who are the best, put them into different categories, right? That physical back, who's the best at that? Who's the best that's going to be coming out of the backfield? Give me some guys who have the top end of their position group in different ways.
So there's one between the tackles sort of pounder that I want in this draft class. So Audric Estime, Notre Dame running back. He's very NFL ready in that regard in the schemes they're running at Notre Dame. But not a super high-end guy either. This isn't a Jonathan Taylor coming out in that mold. They're the best pass catcher in this back. The thing is, there's really none. Unfortunately, there's not a guy who really has that to his game. I would probably say the one I want to feature the most in the pass game is probably Jonathan Brooks. In that regard, he's just so smooth, easy, natural hands catcher. So I like him in that regard. The best, just most explosive home run hitter, Jalen Wright, Tennessee running back. He's just a pure wild card in this running back class. If you watch him in the Tennessee offense, it looks nothing like what he's going to do in the pros, but the man is a freak athletically, running past SEC defenders left and right. And so if you could teach him how to run with patience, how to run with vision, he could be, we could be talking about him as the best running back in this class in 2 years. He's just that gifted. And then to me, Blake Corum's the best all around. He ticks every box, the Michigan running back, awesome in pass protection, just solid as can be sort of runner that never going to wow you, may never excite you in any way, shape, or form, but that guy's going to be a starter in the NFL for probably 8 to 10 years, I'd imagine.
You know what would be hilarious? So the Chargers signed J.K. Dobbins yesterday. Jim is going after John's running backs. Imagine if John said, "Hey Jim, screw off. I'm drafting Blake Corum because Derrick Henry's only got a couple of good years left in him. That would be hilarious. But I want to get to the wide receiver who you think could be this year's Puka Nacua. Now I get it. From a fantasy perspective, it's all about landing spot. It's all about landing spot for the most part. Opportunity is huge, right? Jackson Smith-Njigba was the first wide receiver off the board last year. He didn't really do much in fantasy because he ended up in a lousy situation in year one. Puka came out and, I mean, no one was really talking about him very much. And then pop, all right. But you didn't think he was going to be that good. But yeah, I'll give Lindsay some props. Is there that wide receiver that could be on the board in round 5, round 6, somewhere in that area that you think is being undervalued that could pop?
The one guy who I think ends up on day 3, or very well could end up on day 3, that could right out the gate is Javon Baker from USC.
Oh.
I mean, they go higher than that as well.
Oh, boy. Renner, did you talk to Lindsay about this? She's a big USC honk, right?
I knew she had a good scouting eye, though. That one's obvious whenever I talk to her. So, but he reminds me of Victor Cruz, is the comp I given to him throughout this draft season, that he's just so loose in his lower, like he can stop, start, change directions. It's just like easy for him to get out of his breaks. And so he may not have the best speed, but he ran a 4.52, but somehow averaged over 20 yards a catch still. So he's a guy who still has some explosiveness to his game. And I don't know where he ends up because it's such a stacked wide receiver class. But I think if he goes to the right situation, maybe not Puka Nacua. There's a reason he was 1 of 1, but he could be like Victor Cruz, who ends up being, multiple 1,000-yard receiver as I think.
Okay, so the top of the guys, and I know that we did this exercise with the top 3 wide receivers in terms of finding perfect landing spots. You could make the argument that those 3 guys will succeed in whatever offense they go to because they have more well-rounded skill sets, right? Like their ideal landing spots. That's not true necessarily for the wide receivers that are also very talented, but more specifically talented that you're going to find on the back half of the first round, maybe the start of the second round. It's a deep class, but it does get a little bit more specific as we go further into the draft. So help me find some guys, their ideal landing spots. And I'm going to start with Malachi Corley, who is kind of an interestingly, I guess he's specific in that he's not specific, right? Like the comps that I'm hearing are like Debo's name comes up a lot. And I think that's just because of his versatility. Like, is he a running back? Is he a wide receiver? You can use him in all these different ways. Who would best use him?
That's a great question because he definitely trends more slot than anything else. So, man, I do think Denver, after obviously they don't have a second round pick, but after moving out from Jerry Jeudy, I think he's much more of a slot wide receiver I want in Sean Payton's offense than Jeudy ever was, and that he can take, he can go over the middle, he can run a slant and take a hit. So I think that's the landing spot for him that I'd be interested in seeing, and how he could, wouldn't necessarily be like a Michael Thomas, not exactly that 1-to-1, but he could do a lot of the similar things, then also be more of a screen threat than Thomas.
What about Well, I've got some more wide receiver names, Fab. So unless you do too, let's continue with this theme here.
Go ahead. I'll follow up.
Keon Coleman.
Ooh, Keon Coleman. I've actually comped him to Michael Thomas. Literally talking about Michael Thomas. So, trying to think. I've actually. Selfishly, I've wanted him on the Green Bay Packers ever since I watched them last fall. Really? Now, are they going to draft a wide receiver after what they had last year? I don't know. But the Packers wide receiving core has some of the worst hands of any wide receiver core in the NFL. They need like a pure possession type of wideout. They don't have that. They have a lot of downfield route runners. No one that I trust to win on like a third and medium. And I think you saw that last drive against the 49ers in the divisional round. They just had no guy who was winning on the outside. And so he can do that underneath, be that possession type chain mover. And so selfishly, I'll say
he feels a little bit to me like a guy who needs to be used. And I know he's somewhat polarizing in like the draft evaluator community. He feels like he's a guy who could potentially bust. Like the numbers kind of play out in such a way where like there's clearly that athletic talent, but the fact that he's not creating separation and that most of his catches are these contested catches could also be potentially concerning once you try and put that talent in the NFL and against, NFL caliber defenders.
It's role specific. He's role specific. He needs
and that specific role you think would be best with the Packers. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So you had mentioned the Broncos. One of my fantasy wish list items is that Brock Bowers goes to Denver. Sean Payton's offense has had several tight ends succeed. Jimmy Graham was an elite player under Payton. We saw Jared Cook have one of his best years under Payton. I mean, Ben Watson was good with Payton. They don't really have a whole ton of guys who are going to eat up targets outside of Courtland Sutton, who, by the way, is maybe going to be a holdout. We're not sure about that. Is there a team that you see in the top 12 that could realistically take Bowers that would be a better fit than Denver?
I keep going back to the Jets. Now, will they? It's like tight end's a unique decision in terms of whether you're going to draft one or not that highly. But I just think that Aaron Rodgers, like you're making a 1 to 2 year decision with this top 10 pick from the New York Jets. It is a guy that needs to make an impact now. And so if you draft a tackle, it's a great tackle class. People are saying that he's not starting for you if the New York Jets. And so they obviously, they have Tyler Conklin. He's not moving the needle for me. And when Aaron Rodgers was at his best, 2014, 2011, he threw to tight ends more so than at any point in his career when they had Jermichael Finley way back when. So a guy that can really trust over the middle of the field will get Aaron Rodgers to work the middle of the football field. Whereas if you don't have that guy, he just won't look to that area of the football field. He doesn't want to throw picks, and that's where you throw a lot of picks as a quarterback.
So Bowers doesn't get past 10.
Well, again, we'll see. It's a unique decision. But if I'm the Jets and all the receivers are gone, that's who I'm taking.
All right. What about the other teams that desperately need wide receivers? Like, who do you think most glaringly looks in the first round outside of the teams that we've talked about at the top, most likely to get a wide receiver? And are there any specific wide receivers that you think that they should be targeting?
I think Buffalo is the one that obviously is going to draft a wide receiver. And it's a great class to do so. The one guy I would love there is Adonai Mitchell. I think he could be what Gabe Davis never really was, which is like not only, a downfield threat, but also a guy you can like throw contested catches to. Josh Allen can just like trust and take chances to, because he did that a ton at Texas and at Georgia. So that's fit I love. Now, I don't think he makes it 28, unfortunately. So it may take a trade up, but they've, shown in the past they're willing to make moves if they really got a guy that they like.
Yeah, he would end up being probably a top 3 or 4 fantasy wide receiver in most people's rankings among the rookies. If he did end up in Buffalo, because it's a perfect scenario, there's just a boatload of targets available in that offense. But one of the things that I had suggested that I would like to see is for the Bills to trade for T. Higgins. Probably end up costing them the second round pick that they acquired in the Stephon Diggs trade from Houston. T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Lindsay and I talked about this a little bit at the end of last show. Which one of these guys do you think is most likely to be moved, if either? And who would be the better fit in Buffalo?
I think Higgins is the most likely to be moved. I think we could very well see a draft day trade for him. It may not fetch a first rounder just because of how deep this wide receiver class is, but we may see like the writing on the wall if Cincy goes wide receiver at 18. And I would love the idea of like Brian Thomas Jr. to Cincy. Just in that offense replacing
me and Renner are right on the same wavelength, Rhodes. We're talking about the same thing. I love it.
That would be perfect. So I think Higgins is likely because if you're San Francisco, like Cincy kind of has this big window now where it's like we know Joe Burrow's entire contract, it's golden, right? San Francisco doesn't. They have the rookie contract of Brock Purdy, because when he has to get expensive, you're not winning. You're not putting that roster together with Brock Purdy. So they're going to do all they can to piecemeal this for as long as they can until we have to pay Brock Purdy $40 million. And then they're parting ways with Brock Purdy, or they're parting ways with a good deal of those skill position players.
Follow-up question to all of this. In terms of the guys who, let's say they go to their ideal landing spots. Let's bake that into this hypothetical. Then who is the first guy that you think we're going to end up taking out of this class in fantasy drafts? Like once you start plugging in all of this, I'm going to assume that it's probably a wide receiver as opposed to a quarterback, probably just because of the lay of land in fantasy. But I could see one of these wide receivers at the top if they go to a good landing spot going pretty high in fantasy. How high is like where you think like around these guys? I would be interested in taking them. Give us a range.
Yeah, I think Marvin Harrison's I think he's going to either go to Arizona or LA, right? Or Arizona, the Chargers. And at that point, he's got a quarterback that's going to be able to produce. Like, I think 1,200 yards, close to double-digit TD is not out of the question whatsoever. Like, that's what I would project for a guy given his skill set. So where that lands you in fantasy, it depends on obviously like how you rank class, but it's pretty high, right? It's not first round pick, probably not a second round pick, but like definitely a third round pick, I'd say.
Mike, what kind of fan are you? Who do you root for?
Packers.
There we have it. Okay, so you're in very good shape, my friend. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you.
Besides the wide receiver who you would like to see go to Green Bay, what would be your ideal pick for the Packers? What player? And I know it's on the defensive side because their offense is yoked right now, or maybe it's not. You tell me. What would be the ideal pick for you, Mike Renner, as a Packers fan, that you would like to see them go out and get, and maybe that puts them over the top?
Yeah, there's two players that I would be happy as heck with, one on each side of the ball. Amarius Mims on offense, the Georgia tackle. I think he's going to be a special OT in the NFL. I get these played like no football, but the traits are what the top end guys look like. And at some point he's going to figure it out because he uses his hands really well. And it's something that not a lot of guys who played that little football do. So it's just the more football he plays, I think the higher ceiling is going to push. So him, and then Cooper DeJean, the Iowa corner. I think every single mock in America right now has that fit. But he's just the versatility of being able to play corner or safety at his size with his tackling ability, with his ability to play off coverage or on man coverage. It's just a great fit for what they need because they might have a need at corner, depending on how the corner room shakes out. They might have a need at safety, but they definitely have a need at DB, and he's just a darn good.
Give me a name to keep our eye on draft day that might be, and this is not a positive note, and this isn't necessarily, but so we're prepared. The guy that might be that guy that's waiting in the green room longer than is expected, potentially because I think what you're looking for when you're trying to isolate this is somebody that you're like, I could see people viewing him totally differently. Like the talent is there, but maybe there are too many question marks and I could see teams passing potentially.
So the green room's tight this year. They really made it pretty small. Like the only guy who's like a fringe-ish first rounder is Darius Robinson, but like everyone's calling him a fringe-ish first rounder. So I'm not going to say him. I could see Olu Fashanu, the Penn State tackle. I could see him fall a little bit. Like he's been consistently a top 10 to 13 sort of guy in mock drafts, but I could see him making his way down to like the Rams at 19. Wouldn't surprise me. He's got the smallest hands ever measured for an offensive lineman at the combine, which is just like wild. And like, he's not a good run blocker, but he's an awesome pass protector. And as much as like, I'm not drafting an offensive lineman for what they do as a run blocker in the first round, I'm like, that's what I'm caring about is pass protection. They still, NFL evaluators still kind of want that total package. So I think he could be like the fifth tackle off the board, feasibly. Really, maybe like the fourth in this draft class. I could see him falling of the guys who are, I believe he was invited.
Mike Renner.
Mike, one more for me, pal. And going back to the Packers, Josh Jacobs. Now the lead back. Aaron Jones was good, very good in the second half of last year, more closer to the playoffs than in the playoffs. So certainly the Packers offense is conducive to a running back putting up big numbers. You guys did bring back A.J. Dillon, ho-hum. What can we expect, or what do you expect from Josh Jacobs in Green Bay? Is he an RB1 in fantasy with the Packers?
Oh, 100%. I think they kind of throw that RB by committee that they were trying to do with Dillon and Jones out the window. I think they know that Dillon is maybe he takes some goal line carries from him, but he really wasn't even that good in those situations last year. So I think Jacobs not only going to get a ton of touches, I think they're going to throw to him a ton as well in that offense. Jordan Love loves to do that. They just didn't have guys that were consistent hauling it in last year, unfortunately. But I think Jacobs going to get a ton of catches and a ton of yards.
Mike Renner. Everybody go follow him on the socials. What are your handles? Where can people find your work?
Find me at Mike Renner _ on Twitter. And if you want to tune into the Bleacher Report draft show next Thursday, I will be on that with CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons and Adam Lefkoe.
What?
So it's a star-studded crowd.
Time out. You get to watch the draft virtually, I assume. Or is it in person with CJ Stroud?
No, it's in New York. It's in their bleacher studios. Yeah.
You're going to sit and watch the draft with CJ Stroud and Michael Parsons.
Yes.
Mike.
So
do you need a +1?
Are you going to fanboy? I mean, like, are you going to totally like if? I mean, I've interviewed Micah before. I tried not to fanboy too much, but I mean, those are some pretty good names, man.
So Michael was actually on it last year with me, and he's an intense dude.
Yeah.
He did not for a second like break, and he like did not like lose any steam. He was intense from pick 1 to pick 32. I'm excited to see Stroud though. He's a little bit more of a quiet guy, so I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. I've actually already been texting his OC Bobby Slowick, who's my former coworker at PFF, asking for some tips about like how to break the ice with him. So we'll see.
So good. That'll be so fun. I'd love to hear his thoughts as he's watching these wide receivers come off the board. And I mean, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of positive notes, right? Like he's not going to like talk about any of the negatives, but like that will also be telling where he goes in terms of what he sees that is positive with each one. So that's fun. We'll be sure to check that out. Mike Renner, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining us to help us focus our attention when we're watching the draft next week.
Thanks, Mike. Great stuff, man.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks for listening to the Believe Fantasy Football Show presented by BetOnline. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love to have you back. If you hit that subscribe button, next week's content is going to be in your inbox waiting for you as soon as it is up. And that is going to include on Tuesday a mock draft of the first round with special guests drafting for various divisions and teams. We're going to have Seth Rollins drafting for the Bears, not the Bills. Good God. His favorite team is the Bears, and he's going to be drafting for them 1 and 9. James Roday is drafting for the AFC South. He's a Titans fan. We may have a few other guests joining us as well. So again, subscribe, like, leave a comment, or hit us up on social media. Fabs is at Michael_Fabiano. I'm Lindsay_Rhodes. Always happy to hear your feedback and chat with you guys. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again in a few days.